Hello, Nicole Mashburn again. And so each unit has two labs. In this unit you have a tissue lab and then a skin lab. And so I'm going to break the skin lab into two videos. One is going to be with the models and one will be with the actual histology slides, okay? So let's do the model first and then you'll come back and watch a video with the histology slides. So this is a picture of, whoops, I lost my pen, I'm sorry. There we go. This is a picture of one of the slide models in lab, and everything's labeled, so you can use this as a reference. You also have a PDF file in your Blackboard that has all the structures listed that you need to know. Sorry. Excuse me. Okay, so I'm just going to go through the models and point out structures for you that you need to be able to recognize. And again, you've got the labeled version. You also have your online lab guide that has labeled as well. And the model looks very much like the picture in your textbook too, so you've got several ways to reference and learn your structures. Now this is the skin model, and the first thing we'll do is we'll just talk about the layers. This outermost layer, see this little orange line? So from here up, this is your epidermis, okay, the outermost layer. The pink layer from here to here is your dermis. And then this yellow layer is your hypodermis, or your subcutaneous layer. So that's the first thing. We just start our three layers of the skin. Now your epidermis is made up of what kind of epithelial tissue? Stratified squamous. And so the epidermis actually has layers, and you should have already seen this hopefully in your lecture video. And this this orange layer, this is that first layer, that mitotically active layer, the stratum basale. And then the next layer is this kind of tan layer. It's the stratum spinosum. And then you have this kind of pink layer, the stratum granulosum. And then here, this white layer is the stratum lucidum and then the stratum corneum. Okay, so you start out with stratum basale, and then stratum spinosum, and then stratum granulosum, and then lucidum, and then corneum. Okay, going from deep to superficial. Now the first thing I want you to notice is, if you look, there's a fine line that kind of separates this model into three different sections, okay? This is a section that's found in the palm and sole of your feet, okay? So sole and palm. This is axillary. This is in your armpit, and this is on your scalp. So they've put three models into one. So what I hoped you noticed when I drew this, you saw, ooh, that's got a really large bumpy thing that sticks out. What is that? That's the stratum corneum of thick skin. So sole and palm, this is thick, and these two are thin. Okay, so what makes thick skin thick is that thick layer of stratum corneum. Okay, so that's the first thing you hopefully would have noticed. Now, below this epidermis, you have the dermis, and so all this pink stuff is that dense, irregular connective tissue. And then the hypodermis, you have all this adipose, okay? Is there anything else that sticks out at you between the thick and the thin skin? There's no hair in the thick skin. So you have a hair here, and you have a hair here, okay? So that's one thing you want to notice. You also want to notice some pressure or nervous tissue type endings. Anytime you see something yellow, this is a nerve or some kind of nerve ending or some kind of receptor. These big ones are your Pacinians, your deep pressure receptors, and then you'll notice you have these little bitty ones here. That's the Meissners, and the Meissners are found in the thick skin. They're used for being able to use a fine or discriminating touch. You'll notice in the skin model, you've got veins, the blue things, you've got arteries, the red things, and you'll notice the blood supply goes from the hypodermis through the dermis. You have little capillaries that go almost to the epidermis, but then they stop. So remember, the epidermis doesn't have blood supply, okay? So these are just some general things I want you to notice right now. You have these white things. These are all different types of glands, okay? You have oil glands and sweat glands, and so we're going to talk about each one of these different types of glands and where to expect to find them. Now, if you'll notice, they all have a duct. This one goes all the way up to the top of the skin. This one goes into the hair shaft. This one goes into the hair shaft. That means these are all exocrine glands, okay? And we're going to talk about each one of these glands and what they do. Anything else that just kind of jumps out at you? maybe. This gland and this gland, even though they're both around a hair, they look a little different. Okay, so I just want you to just kind of point out some differences just looking at it. We don't know what they are yet. Just notice from just looking at it that they do look different. So now let's go through each section and go into more detail about what we're actually seeing. So again, this is the thick skin. Okay, so you have your hypodermis, your dermis, and your epidermis, that thick stratum corneum. Now remember, on the lab test, I may say, name this main layer of skin, or I may say, name this small layer. You need to know all these layers of the epidermis, okay? So make sure that you can learn those 5 layers. Here's your vein, here's your artery, here's your capillary. So the second thing I want to talk about, I'll talk about the epidermis and the dermis. If you look where the dermis and the epidermis come together, where you see this kind of up and down wiggly line, the dermis is divided into the dermal papilla and the reticular layer. So the papilla is kind of this part of the dermis that kind of goes like that, okay? And the capillaries kind of go up into that dermal papilla. The reticular layer is everything else. So reticular means web-like, so this is all that dense, irregular connective tissue that kind of forms the structure of the dermis. All right, so again, we're in thick skin, so we need to be able to have a way to have sensory reception. And so in thick skin, think about your fingers. If you want to read Braille, this is where your Meissner's corpuscles are, and they're just right up in that papillary region of the dermis. Your Pacinian corpuscles, they're going to be really deep. Okay, so think P for deep pressure. So you have to really push hard for those things to fire, and they are all over your body. So anywhere that you lean up against something and feel pressure on your body, that's those Pacinians. But the Meissners are only in the thick skin. All right, let's talk about that gland. Let's see if we're going to come back to that. These are the same thing. This is just they've done a little cross-section on it. These are both eccrine. These are eccrine sweat glands. These are the salty sweat, okay? So the salty sweat's made here, and it exits to the top of the skin through a pore, okay, through a duct to a pore. So this is how sweat exits the body. Doesn't have a hair associated with it, and you've got these things, these salty sweat glands, all over your body. This is just another nerve ending. It could be a cold receptor, a hot receptor, a pain receptor. We don't know. It's just some type of a receptor. Same thing here. This is a nerve ending going to that salty gland. So this nerve is going to tell that sweat gland when it needs to sweat, when it needs to produce more sweat. This is a capillary. This is how we're going to get exchange of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nutrients all the way up into the epidermis. Anything else on that? Oh, again, and then we have our fat, our hypodermis. So again, I've just kind of pointed out structures in your thick layer. Now this is your axillary or armpit area, and you should notice you have a hair. Okay, so you have a hair. This is a hair follicle. This is the actual hair itself with a little hair shaft in the middle. And you see you've got the same layers, but here you only have 1, 2, 3, 4. You're missing that stratum lucidum. Remember, that clear layer is only in thick skin. So there's only going to be 4 layers in the armpit and in the scalp. So remember, you need to learn your 4 layers going from the stratum basale to the stratum spinosum, granulosum, and corneum. Again, you've got your papillary region, so this area of the dermis that kind of goes up and attaches to the epidermis is your papillary region. Your reticular region. Again, you have arteries and veins and little capillaries for blood flow and oxygen, carbon dioxide exchange. You have your Pacinians. There's no Meissners here, so there's no discriminating touch. How could you tell if something was moving across your skin in this area? Well, you actually have some little nerve endings that are associated with your hair follicles, so if something wiggles that hair, it'll cause your hair follicle to wiggle, and I've got another picture. I'll show you that on the next slide. We have hypodermis. So what's new? What's different on this one? This big gland here. This is not an eccrine. This is that apocrine. This is an apocrine sweat gland. So remember, we have eccrine sweat glands and apocrine sweat glands. This is the stinky sweat. Your axillary region, this is the one that turns on during adolescence and causes you to produce that stinky sweat. You'll see there's a nerve ending here, so when a lot of times you need something to turn those sweat glands on so they produce their stinky sweat. Apocrine sweat glands, instead of taking it to the surface of the skin, they dump their sweat into the hair follicle. So it's going to enter in where the hair comes out, and then the stinky sweat will come out the same pore that the hair does. So that's your apocrine sweat gland. Now the last one's in your scalp. So this is going to be your scalp, and think about where hair is. And so it looks similar to the axillary, but there's a couple of big differences. We still have our Purkinje and corpuscles, okay, so you have those everywhere. There's no Meissners. We still have 4 layers of the epidermis, those stratum physalis, stratum spinosum, stratum granulosum, and stratum corneum. We still have that. We still have eccrine sweat glands that carry their salty sweat to a pore in the skin, okay. We still have veins, we still have arteries, we still have blood supply, and we still have capillaries. We still have our dermal layer and our reticular layer of the dermis. We still have hypodermis, but we have a hair, just like we did in axillary, okay? But this time we have a different type of gland, okay? And this is the sebaceous gland. Okay, sebaceous gland, all right? And this is the oil gland. So this is where you make the oil when your hair gets greasy. And you'll notice that this is also, just like the apocrine, it's going to be released into the hair follicle, into the same pore that the hair exits the body, that oil also exits that same way. So whereas eccrine goes all the way to the surface, sebaceous and apocrine release theirs around the hair. Now, one other structure. This is the erector pili. This is what gives you goosebumps, okay? So the erector pili muscle is what gives you your goosebumps. So when it contracts, it moves the hair follicle and causes your hair to stand up on end. You've got nerve endings. So again, when you're cold or scared, you've got the nerve endings that cause that to contract. And then you've got nerve endings on the hair follicle, okay? So if a bug is walking across your skin, it's going to cause the hair to wiggle, cause the follicle to wiggle, and that's how you would know a bug was walking across your skin, because you don't have those Meissner's fine touch corpuscles in this kind of skin. You'll notice that the hair follicle, this is the actual hair, and this is the follicle. It's just an invagination. It's like specialized epidermal tissue. We talked about how the skin and nails are just like the epidermis. And you'll see you've got the same layers inside the hair follicle that you do that make up the epidermis of the skin. So hair is just a specialized form of skin. It's just the same cells that make up your skin, make up your hair, just a little different consistency, more keratin, a little stronger and tougher than your skin. Anything else on this model? This is also a sebaceous gland right there. This one's just cut so that you can look inside of it. All right, and then on the back of your skin model, we have examples of burns. If you haven't done your burn video yet, you'll get to that, but just know when you talk about burns, we classify them as first and second and third degree burns. First degree burns damage the epidermis. Second degree burns damage the epidermis and the dermis. Third degree burns damage all 3 layers. Okay, so you may see something like this on your exam as well. So this is part of your lab test for Unit 2, so you'll have some pictures of the tissues, histology. I'm going to show you some skin histology pictures, but you'll have some from this model. So make sure you maybe print off this PowerPoint without it labeled, and then go back and try to label it yourself using the structures that are listed in your list of structures that you need to know. All right, that's all I'm going to talk about now, and I will see you in the histology slide video next.